right, welcome everyone to the January 2021 meeting of the Memphis Astronomical Society. Got another great meeting planned for you guys tonight. We do this every year. It's basically a follow-up from our December program where we discuss telescopes, and really this is meant to be a meeting for you. Anybody who's logged on live, if you have any questions or comments, or quite frankly, one-on-one help with your telescopes, we got some of our experts online tonight, veteran amateur astronomers that have been a part of our group for years, here to help you. Now it's a little different, of course, this year. We can't do it live like we normally do, but we'll do our best via Zoom to either show you demonstrations or answer any questions that you might have. So we want to make this meeting as interactive as possible. So feel free to chime in anytime with your questions or enter them into the chat room. And of course, this meeting is pre-recorded, so we'll have it posted to our YouTube site later for reference. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. Rick, I need you to enable me.
Oh, sorry about that.
How's my audio? Let me just do a quick audio check here. Everybody can hear me? Excellent.
All right.
Okay, you should be able to grab the screen now.
Got it. All right, here we go. Well, first of all, Happy New Year, everybody. And we obviously had somewhat of an unusual year. Hopefully 2021 will be a little bit better, but it's been off to a little bit of a rocky start so far. Now, I don't know about you, but when the big one hits, whether it's a virus that wipes out humanity or a Chicxulub impactor, the first thing I'm doing is I'm getting in my car and making a beeline for the liquor store. The second thing I'm going to do is head straight to Walmart and get my hands on as many rolls of toilet paper as I can. Because when you're half in the bag and you got 532,000 rolls of toilet paper in your living room, the world's problems don't seem quite that bad. But whether we had a virus that's killing people, I guess remains to be seen. But one thing is undisputed: 2020 was a year of a pandemic of stupidity. So hopefully we're having a different conversation in 6 months. I hope everybody's staying healthy and safe. We will get through this, and better times are coming. So happy New Year, everyone. We are the Memphis Astronomical Society, and again, we're a nonprofit public service organization promoting interest in education, astronomy, and related sciences. You can find us on social media, and our website is memphisastro.org. And I want to take a minute to just say subscribe to this YouTube channel if you haven't already. We did have a great year last year on our YouTube channel. Our subscriber base nearly doubled. We had almost 48,000 new views and over 337,000 minutes of content uploaded. So sincerely want to say thanks not only to our membership local here in Memphis, but to our nearly 1,500 subscribers worldwide for checking us out. Hopefully you get a lot of value again out of tonight's meeting, as well as some of the other content we post. And yeah, just again, please take a minute to subscribe to this channel. And thank you again for participating and being involved in our community. So our website is memphisastro.org. Check out the links on this website. We've got a couple of great resources for telescopes on this channel, or I mean on our website, as well as a calendar of events. Not a whole lot new to report. Tomorrow night is our next scheduled observing session, and the weather looks somewhat iffy. Officially, all of our public observing and outreach programs are suspended due to COVID. However, again, we continue to monitor this on a month-by-month basis. So when skies clear, and just keep an eye on your email, and we'll send out notices and get back out and do some observing. So that's where things stand right now. Now, we are doing virtual star parties every month, and we got another one coming up next week, either Friday or Saturday. Not exactly sure on the day yet. But again, this is hosted by Dyer Observatory, Vanderbilt University. MAS is a participant. We've been doing this for the last 6 or 7 months or so. Got another one coming up next month. Again, it's a great opportunity if you got nothing else going during these times to kind of check out what's going on throughout the state of Tennessee. We've got astronomers in East Tennessee, Middle Tennessee, and of course here in Memphis, showing you different views of objects in the night sky. So if you're on our email list, mark this date on your calendar. Again, it's either Friday or Saturday next week. We'll be doing another virtual star party. And of course, last month we had the conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn on December the 21st, first time in almost 800 years or so that it was observable. If you missed it, you can actually see a replay of it on the YouTube channel. And this is, of course, is the Vanderbilt YouTube channel where we do our virtual star parties, and live from Vanderbilt on YouTube. So if you want to see the live feed of the conjunction and you missed it back in December, check this video out and show our colleagues over at Dyer Observatory some love by subscribing to their channel as well. You can see about 500 or a little over 400,000 people actually viewed this. So it was quite an event. And I got a couple pictures here to show of the conjunction on December the 21st, including this one from Brent Ellis, one of our members on Facebook. So this is a great shot of Saturn and Jupiter. You can see the actual banding structure on the face of Jupiter, as well as the moons and then the rings of Saturn. Just a really great shot. And this one was taken by Theo Wellington of the Barnard Seaford Astronomical Society in Nashville. And here she actually labeled some of the moons of both Jupiter and Saturn. So this is another great shot. And of course, we got some of the fake pictures also. So they don't call it the Christmas star for nothing. Be very careful of what you see on Facebook. Never believe what you see or read on Facebook. Always check. So if you'd like to join our email list, go to the website joinmas.com, enter your name and your email address. Again, we send updates out about once a week, upcoming meetings, star parties, any events. So if you're not on our email list already and you'd like to be, just go to joinmas.com and enter your details. And when you become a paying member, you get access to the Meteorite, which is our newsletter. It's got some great content in there, including articles from some of our members, minutes from past board meetings, an astrophotography gallery, and then also a star chart for the month. And for everyone tonight, if you're logged on or if you're watching this on YouTube, I'll have links to these two documents in the description. And that, of course, is the January sky chart and our membership application. So if you're interested in becoming a member, just download our membership application, fill it out. It's already pre-filled in electronic format, so you don't have to print it out and handwrite it. Just fill in the fields and then email it back to us at Memphis Astronomical Society at gmail.com, or you can email it to us at info@memphisastro.org. Either one. Love to have you as a member. And that leads us into tonight's program. And again, this kind of follows up from what we did last month in December. And we've had several questions come in. And we're going to, again, the intent is to make this meeting more or less interactive. So part of it will be structured. Part of it will be a little bit unstructured. So I'm actually going to kick off the first part here and then kind of open it up to the rest of the people online tonight for discussion. And I've got several questions that came in via email over the course of the last few weeks, including this one. Hi, looking forward to the Zoom meeting tonight. I do have a couple questions. Hope to hear answers when I join the Zoom meeting from Hong Kong. I'm not even sure what time it is in Hong Kong right now, but hope you guys are doing well. We, the airline crew, are confined to our hotel rooms while on most layovers in Asia due to COVID, and hope this will be a great diversion. Thank you so much for your time and effort. Again, hope you're staying safe in Hong Kong and hope we get through this, this year. So question number one, I have a Celestron 8SE. Any advice on cleaning the corrector plate? And let me go ahead and just kind of give some insight into question number one, and then we'll answer the other two questions. So there is a website. Here's the link here, arcsky.org, and it actually gives a pretty detailed procedure for cleaning the optics, whether it's your lenses, corrector plates or eyepieces. And I've not followed this myself per se. Typically, I just turn this over to Rick, and then he's helped me clean some of my optics, including the mirror on one of my 10-inch or one of my Dobsonians. So, Rick, I know you probably have some comments on this and some insight into this question.
Yeah, Jeremy, I do. And uh, I don't need to share the screen, I think, or anything for this, but um, cleaning optics in general is something that you need to be careful about. All of your lenses and what have you have got coatings on the surface. So using anything that's got ammonia in it is a bad idea. Using Windex is a bad idea most of the time. Um, uh, I started cleaning mirrors a long time ago. I'll talk about that in a minute, but and I actually got this from me themselves. I finally got in touch with them about cleaning a corrector plate on one of their 16-inch telescopes. And what they recommended, and I've used ever since, and I make it up myself, they recommend alcohol and distilled water, and that's it. And what they recommend is not isopropyl alcohol, although that would be okay if you can get the 99% or better isopropyl alcohol. And that's not what you generally pick up at most drugstores, or certainly not at department stores. Some drugstores will have some of the 90, 91%, but you can actually buy 99% isopropyl alcohol. And that's the stuff you want to use. Now, I use pure grain alcohol. I go to the liquor store and get a pint of what's called Everclear, pure grain alcohol, and then mix that half and half with distilled water. And I make up basically a quart of that ever so often and use it to clean all of my lenses, eyepieces, uh, and corrector plates. You don't use that on mirrors. And what most people don't realize about mirrors are the mirror in your house that you look at, that mirroring is on the back side of the glass. And you can clean that glass surface all day long with whatever you want. You're not going to mess up the mirror. But the mirror in a telescope, because you don't want the effects of that first surface of glass causing multiple images, because every surface of glass is somewhat reflective. You have that mirroring is on the front surface of the glass. You just use glass as something really smooth to put the mirroring on. And that mirroring on some mirrors can be quite fragile. It doesn't take much. A fingerprint can be permanent and non-removable. Some mirrors, they actually put a quartz coating over the top of the aluminized mirroring, and those are pretty durable, but be careful. I use nothing but distilled water when I'm cleaning mirrors. I typically try to take them out of the telescope. They can be cleaned in the telescope. That is the case with Schmidt-Cassegrains. You removing that mirror from a Schmidt is rather difficult. It can be done, but it's a daunting challenge, and getting it back exactly right can be troubling. But I get the mirror out, get it in some kind of sink or bowl or a tub or something. In the case of Jeremy's 20-inch, I had this big tray we put it in, and we covered it up with water, and for the first washing, it doesn't have to be distilled water. You can use tap water, but you use a little bit of dish soap, a few drops, 2 or 3 drops of dish soap, and just lightly take some balls of cotton and let it float over the surface of the mirror. What you want to do is dislodge any dust or dirt that's on the mirror and let it float away. And then once you're done with that, you rinse it thoroughly. You get stand it up on edge, rinse it off thoroughly with distilled water. You use distilled water so it doesn't leave behind minerals or anything that are going to create spots on the mirror as the water dries away or evaporates off and leaves the minerals behind. So you don't want that. You can use a hair dryer or something to cause the drying to go quickly. You can, if you've got a good source of clean, dry, compressed air, not something from your garage air compressor that's loaded with oil, you can spray it to try to force the water off of it, that sort of thing. And that generally does it. So that's about all I got about cleaning optics.
So what was your opinion of this website?
Well, this guy is really good. I mean, I've got one of his what does he call it? Souped up telescopes. He actually supercharged. I've got
supercharged, yes.
Yeah, I've got a Meade 10-inch Schmidt-Cassegrain that he has supercharged, and the guy's good. He's smart. But what he recommends, and it's a good formula, but it's a mixture of Windex and distilled water and a wetting solution that's a little difficult to come by these days, called Kodak Photo Flow.
That is for cleaning negatives.
Yeah, it was. It was to keep spots and stuff from occurring on negatives when you were drying your film. So it's a good formula. It's, like I said, I have not found it necessary to use that. I use, like I say, alcohol and distilled water mix, and that seems to work fine. I ran across a corrector plate that had a grease. And that's another thing. If you've got a Schmidt-Cassegrain, if you've got a Newtonian, if you've got a telescope, don't store it standing up on end. Anything that's inside the telescope will fall down on the mirror or on the lens. And that can be anything like a spider that decides to go in there and build a web, and he'll live just fine and not bother anything until he poops. And then that's going down on the mirror or on the lens, right? So leave your telescopes laid out horizontally so that when spider poop happens, it's on the internal side of the telescope where it doesn't hurt anything. Same way with dust and oil, any kind of oil or grease, and that's what this was. It was a 16-inch Meade Schmidt-Cassegrain that had been stored with the corrector plate down, and there's some grease in the primary
grease from the center
moving mechanism that had gotten hot and dripped down on the corrector plate, and I had to take the corrector plate off and clean it, and I was afraid of harming the coatings, so that's when I contacted Meade and got their recommendation for that. So
okay, so let me see the other two questions that this individual had here. I know, hang on.
Now, if anybody has questions as we're talking about any of this, feel free to ask. This is informal.
Yep. So I bought a wedge for the same telescope. Where can I find a definitive guide on this wedge for a good polar align? So thoughts on that?
Well, again, sorry, go ahead, Rick.
Well, I was just going to say, we can show this in just a minute. Jeremy did a short video on how to set up a fork-mounted Celestron telescope. It's not an 8SE, but it's on an equatorial wedge, and we can go through that and let that play. It's good, and I think we can let that happen. But
Yeah.
Freddie, if you've got some particulars you want to discuss beforehand, or we can just go ahead and play the video.
Yeah, the video is good. I was going to say that the same link that Jeremy's shared before has a guide for polar aligned and equatorial telescope, and it's pretty good too. So
Okay.
you can kill two birds on the same spot. I learned a lot when I was starting in astronomy from that page, and it has a good information there. If you have a mid telescope, I can tell you that the mid telescope cannot align well in polar mode when you are using a wedge. It's a bug on the mid software, and they haven't corrected it up to this date. Okay, so it's something you can deal with, but you cannot use that to polar align the scope. Once you have polar align, you can use the mid software and it will go to perfectly. But you cannot use the software to align the telescope.
Okay.
That was something I learned.
Well, all
Yeah,
right. Well, let's listen. Let's take a look at Jeremy's video here real quick.
I'm Jeremy Veldman. I'm going to show you how I set up my 8-inch Schmidt Cassegrain on a fork wedge equatorial mount with clock drive. So my house faces due north, behind me is due south, so I'm going to set it up right over there. And I got a clear view, when it's dark of course, of just over the roof of my garage of the North Star. So I need to polar align my telescope so that it tracks. So this is the mount. I'm going to set it up right over here. Again, I got a clear shot of Polaris facing due north where my garage is. And I want to make sure that my mount basically faces due north as best as possible. All right, next is the equatorial wedge, and that just sets right on top of the mount. And you can see it's tilted at an angle, which allows me to line the telescope up with the North Star. So I'm just going to put that on here. And then it screws right on top. Now there's a bubble right here that allows me to level the telescope. And basically I just want that little bubble there to get in the circle. So I'm going to do that by adjusting the mount. I'm going to do that by adjusting the mount as best as possible. So I'm just going to adjust these legs here on the bottom until that bubble is lined up, until it's in the center. So I'm just going to do the back leg first because it's not completely on an even surface here. And then bring the front leg up a little bit. So this leg's got to come up just a little bit. Again, you know, do the very best you can. So now, you just see here. And the back leg comes up just a little bit more. So it's looking pretty good. The bubble is basically in the center of the circle, which means that my telescope is basically aligned now. So I should have it basically facing due north when the North Star is out and the mount is level. Now there is a compass on this mount that can help you align your mount due north, and you can use that a little bit. To be honest, typically I don't use this as much. What I really do is I just use my iPhone. There's a compass on your iPhone and you can bring it up, and I usually just use my iPhone compass and get it to line up as best as possible. Just kind of eyeball it really, and I more or less know where the North Star, where Polaris is going to be, also right over my roof. So between that and the iPhone compass, I can typically get it to line up due north pretty good. All right, next is the optical tube assembly. And you can see it comes in a chest like this. It's an old-fashioned chest. The kids love this because they think there's either treasure or a dead body in here. But this is an older telescope. It's about 35 years old, so it comes in one of these old-fashioned chests, if you will. So I'm just going to open that up and take the tube out. It's got a key here, which is actually good because I store it in my garage, and if it didn't have a key, the kids would get inside of it, and who knows what they would do. So I'm just going to go ahead and open it up. And there it is. You can see the telescope fits inside the chest pretty well. Takes a little bit of finessing to get in here, but it's got some nice padding around the edges, so that really helps the telescope. So I'm actually going to go ahead and get it out now. Let me show you the back here. So now it comes with 3 of these knobs. So you can get these from Bob's Knobs or some, or a company comparable to that. And of course these are just like little nuts. And you just screw one of them on the edge. So for the bottom of the telescope, this part has to face, let me just show you here. So this has to face due north. So that's going to go on the top. So I need a knob here, and then one here and one here. So I'm actually just going to, if I can show you this, I'm going to insert the first knob right here, just a little bit, and then that will allow me to place it on the fork wedge. So I'll do that like so. And then I'll just place the other 2 as well. So you can see here, I'm just inserting the nuts into the back of the telescope. Again, 3 of them, 1 on top, and then these 2 down here. They just kind of hold the telescope in place. Make sure they're nice and secure and tight. Then I've properly mounted the optical tube assembly. All right, now that the optical tube is on, I need to orient it so that it faces due north and I can get it lined up with Polaris, the North Star. So to do that, I'm going to do 2 steps. Number 1 is there's a clutch on the bottom. I'm going to release this clutch here so that I can rotate the telescope 180 and get it lined up. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. So I turn it around. Now there's a line here, and then there's a line with a dot or a knob here in place. I just line those 2 up so that I know that it's facing due north. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm just going to turn the clutch here to lock it in place. So that's the first step. Now the second step is I'm going to turn the optical tube to go due north. In order to do that, there's another clutch right here. So all I got to do is flip that clutch here, and then when I do that, the telescope tube will actually rotate. And then I just line it up, more or less, and then it's in place. Now, after I'm done with that, I'm going to get my viewfinder in place. So I'm just going to adjust these screws here, because again, this is how I store it. Now, one accessory that's essential for helping you find things is a tel rad. We did an episode on this, on how to install one on your telescope, but I use it on everything. I use it on my Dobsonians. I use it on this telescope. You can see I've got the mount here. When you buy a tel rad online, it will come typically with a tel rad base. Very easy to install. You just stick it on there literally, but without this, it's going to be very hard for me to find things. Now with it, if I can see it naked eye, I can typically find it in seconds. So literally all I'm going to do is just place it on the mount and just screw it in. And there it is. That's my tel rad. That's going to help me find objects throughout the course of the night. All right, next I'm going to install the eyepiece holder and then the right angle viewer. And that just goes right here. You can see I got the silver plate that just covers the cavity where that goes. So I'm just going to unscrew that. So the first step is to take that off. And then once I do that, I'm going to go ahead. I'm just going to set this here a minute. And I'm going to place this. And this allows me to install not only eyepieces, but also the right angle finder. So I'm just going to screw that on here like so. And then I got my right angle basically accessory so that it's easier to put my eyepieces in. So I'm going to stick that in there. Now that's on there. And then the last piece is literally just to put the eyepiece in place. All right, now that the telescope is set up, I'm going to do a series of last-minute tweaks to get it to line up with Polaris. Of course, it's not out right now. It's during the day and it's cloudy, but just use your imagination, pretend it's dark. So the first step I'm going to do is I'm going to take the cover off the optical tube, of course, set that down. And now, if I know where Polaris is, I'm going to use my Telrad to basically try and get that lined up. And then I'm going to go into my viewfinder. I use both the Telrad and the viewfinder for finding things. Mostly the Telrad, but I use the viewfinder also. And I'm going to adjust the telescope based on where I see Polaris. Typically, if I've done a good job lining up, you know, getting it as close to due north as possible, I should be able to find it. And of course, I'm just clearing the roof of my house, but okay, so let's just say it's there. Not completely in the viewfinder yet. So what I'm going to need to do is make some minor tweaks. There are two screws right here on the mount. What I can do is open those screws up and actually unscrew the mount slightly, and I can adjust the telescope back and forth depending on where Polaris is. And so I'm just going to move it until I can get it lined up more or less in my viewfinder. Now, the viewfinder's nice, the Telrad's nice. It don't mean a thing if it ain't in the eyepiece. So I'm going to look into my eyepiece, and of course, you know, now of course I'm off, right? So I've got to adjust the telescope until I can get it in my eyepiece. So again, if I've done a reasonably good job initially, then I should be able to just do some minor tweaks to the base of the telescope until I get Polaris lined up in my eyepiece. All right, let's just say it's there, okay? So then I'm going to tighten the screws on the base or on the mount. Polaris, get it centered into the eyepiece, and then when I do that, I'm going to go back to my Telrad. There are 3 knobs in the back of my Telrad, and I'm going to tweak those until Polaris is in the center of my Telrad. And then I'm going to go to my viewfinder. It's a right angle viewfinder. This is a little trickier because I've got 4 or 5 screws that I need to manipulate. And it's going to take some finessing, more or less. But you just have to play. What I typically do is I just play with these screws until I get Polaris into the viewfinder. So I start with the viewfinder and the Telrad, then I get it in the center of the eyepiece, and then I go backwards. Make sure that the Telrad is calibrated, and then also the viewfinder. And then if Polaris is in all 3, then I'm basically set to go. All right, the last step is I'm going to hook up the power supply to the telescope. I got a portable battery. You can pick one of these up at either Walmart or Lowe's or Home Depot. Very convenient, especially if you're traveling. It's got jumper cables, it's got power, everything you need. And then I've got a power cord. And again, one end just plugs in, kind of like it does the cigarette lighter of your car, if cars still have cigarette lighters. And then the other end just plugs right into the mount of the telescope. It's got a 12-volt power supply, and that's it. Now it's on. I can hear the gears grinding. If I've done a good enough job lining my telescope up due north with the North Star, both the mount and then also the tube, which I just showed you, this telescope will track. And that's the reason why I like this scope compared to my Dob. My Dobsonian is great, love it, but it doesn't track, so I got to keep moving it all the time. Once this is set up, I can set it on an object and it'll sit there and track for several hours throughout the course of the night. So that's it, I'm ready to go. Now, this is not necessarily the best telescope if you want to do a Messier marathon or jump around and look at 15, 20, or 30 different objects throughout the course of the night. Still prefer the Dobsonian. But if there's one thing you want to look at and just kind of dote on it throughout the course of the night, this is great. Did that for the Mars opposition a couple months ago. Had a clear shot of Mars looking this direction. So, and then of course we had the conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn. So for planetary and bright stuff, it's perfect. Now, here's what I do. I don't have a go-to controller, so I can't just type in an object and slew to it like you can with the more advanced mounts. All this is a mount that has a clock drive on it, so I still got to find things by hand. But that's okay. If I know where stuff is and I've got my Telrad and my viewfinder and I've done everything, set everything up properly, it's very easy. So let's just say hypothetically it's 2 months earlier, October, we got the Mars opposition. If I look due southeast, I should be able to find Mars. And by the way, this is where Orion is rising in the early evening too. Had this telescope out a few nights ago and I was looking at M42, the Orion Nebula. This is a great telescope for that as well. So I just released one of the clutches. I'm going to turn the telescope. And again, I'm just doing this for demonstration purposes. And then I got the second clutch here. Now, this is where my Telrad comes into play. It's invaluable. I look through my Telrad to find the object of interest. If I can see it naked eye, then I can find it. And typically, I don't even need to use my viewfinder anymore if it's all been calibrated correctly. But I will move the telescope first by hand with the clutches. That's my coarse tuning. And then there are a couple of knobs on the bottom of my telescope, and that's what I use for my fine tuning. And I'm just going to go ahead and adjust the eyepiece here as well. So again, I'm just kind of more or less pretending right now, but look into the eyepiece and then I can use my knobs for fine tuning whatever object I want to look for. And until I actually get it in the eyepiece. And then once I do that, if it's centered in the eyepiece, it's going to stay there throughout the course of the night. So I can just sit here in my easy chair. Again, if I'm looking at a planet like Mars, or if I'm looking at the conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn, or even the moon, or even some of the brighter deep sky stuff, I can just literally look through this eyepiece throughout the course of the night and just dote on it, just kind of look at it and stare at it. Now, may not sound terribly exciting when you want to just look at several stuff, at random throughout the course of the night. But if there's one object and you just want to stare at it intently for a while, this is a great telescope for that. And I don't have to keep moving it to keep it in the field of view because the clock drive on the mount will do that for me. So that's it. Now, if I want to, I can get up, go take a break, go inside, eat dinner, use the bathroom. Sometimes I brush my teeth, take a shower, get ready for bed, just let the telescope sit here. Come back out just before I go to bed, get a quick look, and it's still right there. So that's it. This is my 8-inch Schmidt-Cassegrain on an equatorial wedge fork mount. This telescope is pretty old, it's about 30, 35 years old. So it has a clock drive, not a go-to mount. Still got to find things by hand, but it gives you an extra level of convenience and comfort, if you will, for observing because it tracks things. You don't have to keep moving the telescope by hand. So another option to consider. So I'm a Dobsonian guy, but that kind of is a step up from a Dobsonian where you have to keep moving the telescope all the time. It does get a little cumbersome. It's nice to have a telescope that tracks. So I like the clock drive. I know some of you have that kind of telescope also.
Hey, Jeremy, I have a tip for you.
Yeah.
You can use the division between the slabs in your driveway are oriented east-west. You can set the two front legs of the telescope inside that division, and you will be almost polar aligned all the time. You don't have to tweak too much. That's what I do here.
Yeah, we did that with my 3.5-inch ETX when I first got it. We were looking at the sun a few months ago, or a few years ago. So is that all driveways in Collierville?
Well, mine is like you, but the exit of my driveway points north. And I
Oh,
use one of those things to, even if it's not perfectly east-west, once you adjust your telescope to point into Polaris, where it is inside that line, it will always be the line.
yeah.
You just need to level it, and that's it.
Really, all driveways in the United States of America should be built from this point forward with markers in the driveway of where to place the legs of a telescope to have it properly
Yes,
polar
I
aligned.
agree.
So I move that we pass a motion to have that done.
So moved.
Okay. I second that.
Anybody else have any comments or feedback on polar alignment?
One thing you can try to get the wedge itself. Now, you'll still have to do all the fine tuning with the telescope once you mount it, but take a phone, it could be an iPhone or Android phone, doesn't matter, running a planetarium software such as Sky Safari, and put it on the wedge with old rubber bands or something so that it's fairly stable, and then in the phone on the planetarium program, find the south celestial pole so that you're looking down at the south celestial pole, and you get the wedge aligned so that the south celestial pole is facing
Yes.
you. That means that over your shoulder, the telescope is going to be
Polaris.
pointing at the north celestial pole. And that will get you started with the wedge itself. Now, again, once you get the wedge set that way, because that will get you set for latitude and pointed toward both poles, and then you'll have to put the telescope on, and then you'll have to do all the fine tuning that Jeremy described. But that's one way to get the wedge itself set up.
Excellent idea.
Hey, this is Roger here. I'm the guy who submitted that question. How you guys doing? The reason I put that out there is because the Celestron's hand controller and the instructions are extremely confusing and complex. And looked all over the internet for guidance on this, and nobody seems to have the same idea, much less the definitive idea. So, well, I had an old Meade, an older SCT from '86 that I use that technique that I just watched. It works good, but doesn't seem like the Celestron, at least, is very amenable to that technique. So I don't know if anybody has any Celestron specific ideas or directions.
Celestron has a routine for polar align. Okay, it starts with, it tells you, okay, point at Polaris the best you can. And then it will go to another star and tells you, okay, adjust the azimuth and altitude controls until you have the star center. So you will center without moving the telescope. You will move the adjusters, okay? The wedge,
Okay.
latitude, and azimuth. Then once you have that center, it will tell you to go back. It will go back to Polaris, and then you center again. And you have to do that iteration 2 or 3 times, and you will get a very fine polar alignment.
Okay, maybe I just need to stick with it more. It just seems like
Yes.
I said, that program that we just watched seems very, very straightforward, whereas the Celestron one seems extremely complex. And I can't connect the dots, but I'll when I have time at home, I'm going to work on that a little bit more. Thank you, though.
You can practice at your house in a room during the day when you don't have the darkness, acting against you. You try that and get familiar of how the controls work and what are the movements of the telescope once you do each command. And then let's say I move it a little bit to the right, and you practice first the procedure, go through all the keystrokes and everything, and then you can try that at night.
Okay. Thank you, Fred.
Hey, is your Celestron a single arm or a fork mount?
And it's a single
It's a,
8SE.
yeah, it's an ADC. It's a single.
It's a single. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had that same thing and had the dickens of a time getting it. And a lot of it was I was putting the arm on the wrong side and everything was totally off. So kind of figure out which side the arm is going on. Because if you put it on the other side, the whole telescope flipped upside down.
So which is the right side then?
Yeah, it's crazy. You know, I got to go back and look, and maybe you can send Jeremy a message, and he can connect us, and I'll try to figure out how I can do it.
He sent us
Okay.
an email. Keith will forward it to you.
I
Yeah,
might be able
thanks,
to help
guys.
you out. I might be able to help you there. There should be a label that says Celestron on one side, and that's the side that should face up.
Okay.
It's just like a little metal plate on the outside of the main mirror that says Celestron. You want that to be facing the sky.
Okay.
Now, Ann has got 3 of those 8SEs.
Well, we actually have 10 at the college,
Oh, 10.
and then I have my own at home. But students always get it flipped, and it can mess up everything. So if it doesn't work one way, try it the other way.
That's probably one of my problems right there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Excellent. Any other questions? Rick, I'm going to throw it over to you at this point.
All right, let me, so I meant to put together a bunch of stuff and then the holidays happened and let me, so anyway, last weekend when I was going to work on this presentation, my hot water heater went out, and I guess you're seeing my screen. See, here's my hot
Which
water
of those
heater.
is the scope? I don't understand which one is the scope.
Well, I got to thinking when I brought that hot water heater down from the attic with this 2-wheel hand cart, I thought this feels vaguely familiar, right? And of course, it's what I do with my 13-inch dial all the time as well. So, so there you go. So much for that. I wanted to take a second and say welcome to our officers and board of directors. We have some new members this year that have joined in the board of directors, and already we're have enjoyed a lot of great insights and got some new ideas from them participating. You know, some of us have been around for a while, and honestly, sometimes we do the same thing over and over again, and probably shouldn't. So we've gotten some great ideas. Ann and Steve and Ellen, Eileen, all joined us this year, and thank y'all for doing so. So the next, Ann sent a presentation to go over, and she sent some questions along, and I thought, you know, I hadn't thought of those. Those are good questions. Apparently, she's a professor at the local university, Rhodes College, and she teaches physics and I guess an astronomy course or two. And apparently, people aren't sometimes sure which one is the finder scope and which is the main scope. And you know, it's the vocabulary is a thing. And that's one of the reasons I'm not big on TLAs. You know, I hate throwing those around. TLA means 3-letter acronym, right? So this part of a telescope right here is called the OTA, or optical tube assembly. I'm going to call it optical tube assembly. So we'll try to stay away from the acronyms and abbreviations. The optical tube assembly, or the main telescope, is generally the biggest one, and has changeable eyepieces. A finder scope typically does not have changeable eyepieces, and it's a wide field of view, usually about a 7 power. Probably the most common size of a finder scope on moderate sized telescopes is a 7 by 50 millimeters. So it's a 7 power and a 50 millimeter objective. It's pretty typical of a binocular dimensions. So it's half of a binocular maybe. And then how to align a finder scope. So I wanted to take a minute to talk about that and the difference between aligning a finder scope and aligning the telescope. There, most of the time, and I think what Ann was talking about when she talked about aligning the telescope, we're talking about the stellar alignment of the telescope, getting it aligned with the night sky. I will point out that there is an issue sometimes, and this kind of telescope that I've got pictured is one of them that can suffer this. This telescope is a Newtonian mounted in slip rings. And they do that so that you can rotate the telescope in its mount to get the eyepiece to where it is more usable. You can put this telescope in an odd position where essentially you'd have to stand on your head to look through the eyepiece. But if this, if the optical axis of the telescope is not aligned with this, what's called the right ascension axis of the equatorial mount, it can cause you problems, especially trying to find things, especially with a go-to mount. So let me break away from the screen share and go to my camera. And I guess y'all can see me. I don't see me. Yeah, there you go. I see me. I got an iPad for a monitor. So my telescopes don't normally hang out here in my office, but this mount originally came with a Newtonian, and this is the rings that came with it. And one of the things that an adjustment that is here that some people overlook is the fact that these rings can be mounted at different distance from this plate that they're mounted on. You see on this end, I've got it raised up. This center screw, you loosen it up and then drive these Allen head screws in further to cause this gap to be here. And this can allow you to adjust the angle of how this is mounted. This is called a dovetail plate, and this dovetail plate clamps into this mount right here. And again, this telescope is not adjustable in that manner. This dovetail plate is hard mounted to this telescope, and fortunately it is optically aligned, so that's not an issue there. But if you've got one of these with slip rings, that can be something that can be a problem. Now, to align your finder scope with your main telescope, the easiest thing to do is pick something, do it in the daytime, pick something as far away as you can, the top of a tree. My favorites are those insulators on top of high tension, high voltage power lines. You know, pick one of those insulators on the furthest one away you can find and center the main telescope on it and use as high magnification eyepiece as you got to do this and get it exactly in the center. And at that point, you use the crosshairs in your finder scope, and in this case, I'm using this as a finder scope, and you mount, you've got 3 screws that are supposed to center the telescope in these mounting rings. You leave one of them alone, set one front or rear, I don't care. But then you can use these screws to push the other end of the telescope around to get the crosshairs to line up on that object that you've picked to center in the eyepiece of the main telescope. And that's how you align your finder to your main telescope. Now, aligning the telescope to the North Star and then to other stars throughout the night is a matter of, it's different for different telescopes. For mine, for this type of mount, what you've got to do is basically get this axis to line up with the polar axis of the Earth, or to be pointed at the North Star. That is done mechanically. It's not done with the telescope itself. In this case, you can use these adjustments here to tilt this mount back and forth this way. And you use these screws, and they're rather hefty, to tilt the mount, to tilt this axis this way. You know, you set it at roughly 35 because that's roughly our latitude, and that's a starting place. But that's every time you set this down, I have to do some minor adjustments. This one also has a bubble level. So the starting place in all this is to make sure that your tripod, your mounting base, is as level as you can get it. That's always a start. Then you use this to adjust this to get it. Now to look at the North Star, you've got to make sure that this axis then is aligned with this one. And this way they're parallel, but this way they might not be, right? That you can rotate this. So how do you know if it's centered correctly with this axis? There are a number of ways to do that. One of my favorites is to basically use a level. Where did the level go? Anyway, I use a level and set it here and turn the telescope sideways and get this. If this has been leveled, then when I set this level and lock it down, then I can set this setting ring to 90. Is that right? Is it 90 or 0?
Yes.
That's 90, right? I set that to 90, right? And this setting ring is adjustable. You can loosen up screws on it and rotate it, right? It's not fixed. So once you get this leveled here, you set the rotating this setting ring to 90. Then you loosen this up and rotate it back to 0. And that should put you in the right orientation for doing north. Or you can get a polar alignment camera and software on a computer and let it do all the work. I don't use a finder scope on this telescope at all, actually. I use a red dot finder. Because I just use this to see if I'm in the general vicinity. I actually also have a quite powerful green laser pointer mounted to this thing when I can turn it on and actually see where it's pointed. And in my case, I use this to show people where the telescope is pointed, because I use this telescope at public observing sessions a lot. So anyway, that's about aligning the finder scope. What was the other question? There was a good question, and I hadn't thought about this in a long time, and it's how to align how to use a eyepiece filter. And it turns out I need to take his headset off just a second. I'll be right back. Let me hit mute. Sorry about that. My headset cord isn't long enough. So here's an 1.25" eyepiece, and here's a filter. And this one is a light pollution blocking, I think. This is, what is this? This is an IR rejection filter. And they both have threads, and this actually screws into the end of the eyepiece, the end that goes in the telescope.
Rick, okay, that is better.
Out of view. Okay, so this has threads on it, and then the inside of the eyepiece has threads, and it just screws in here. And then this can be used to insert inside the telescope, and you've now got an eyepiece filter. Probably the most common eyepiece filter is a moon filter, or a variable polarizing filter for looking at the moon. The moon is almost always too bright to look at without one. It's almost painful. Never, ever, ever use an eyepiece solar filter. If you find one, take it outside, find a hammer, and smash it on a rock. They are incredibly dangerous. They don't make them anymore. They don't allow them to be sold anymore. But when you take a telescope like this 8-inch mirror in here, or the 13-inch mirror in this thing, and you use that to bring all that solar energy from the sun down to a little bitty filter about this size and concentrate all that energy on it, it gets really, really hot. And when that little piece of glass cracks and you happen to be looking through it, you go blind instantly and permanently. And I have been around one, and I heard it. It just made a snap. And fortunately, no one was looking through the telescope, but you could see light pouring out of the eyepiece at that point. And it was like, holy cow, that was dangerous. So that's how to do an eyepiece filter. She had one more question on her list, and that was cautioning about not moving a telescope. So if you've got a modern go-to telescope, those 8 SEs are a good example. This one has a go-to drive as well. Once I do all the work to get it polar aligned, star aligned, what that means when you do star alignment is the computer now knows exactly where the telescope is in the world and in the universe, and what time it is, and what should be up, and where it should be in relationship to the telescope. And it can go find it, right? Once you've gone through all the trouble to get it to know all that, if you pick the telescope up and move it, you got to start over. And it takes time. I don't care how smart it is, the best telescopes at this, and I think the most complex ones are the Meade light switch models, right? They actually have their own built-in cameras to do their star alignments and everything. You set it down, turn it on, come back in about 30 minutes, and supposedly it's all done. I've never used one. And the Celestrons are pretty good, right? This one, not so much. Actually, this one actually does really well too now, but it's because this little computer takes pictures of everything this is seeing and does what's called plate solving. Basically, it recognizes what it's looking at and says, oh, this isn't right. I need to move this way to get it right. This is so cool. It's really, really fun. It's fun to watch it sit there and do that. But where was I going? Once you do all that, you don't pick it up and move it, or else you're going to have to start over. And in fact, if you have the ability or a place or an observatory, or even just going to cover the telescope up for the night and look at it again tomorrow night, I've done that a lot, taking telescopes camping. You know, if I'm just leave it set up and it's a beautiful weekend, I'm going to park it in its home position, turn the power down, off, cover it up, come back to it tomorrow night. All I have to do is power it up and start observing again. I don't have to go through all that polar alignment business or even star alignments. So there's some benefits there. The other thing is being careful of the cords, right? So this telescope is going to rotate this way. If this cable were to get hung on something, you could snap a cable loose. You can jerk a camera out of a socket. You can tear something up with this thing. It doesn't do that. One of the reasons, see, I have a handful of cables that actually go up to this computer. This is a computer that controls this telescope and the cameras. In fact, I actually just access this wirelessly over my iPad to manage what it's doing. And you can see that I've used some wire loom to put all those cables in one thing so that I don't have to keep track of it. And it stays clear of everything in one bundle. So wire management and this kind of thing is important and something to keep an eye open for when you're getting started. Any questions?
Do you have any other questions? If not, I've got a couple more to field here. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen.
Anybody, if you want to put something in the chat, feel free. We'll pick those up and answer them as well.
All right. Hello and greetings. I just watched and subscribed to the video episode 21, which is on eyepieces. Very helpful and thank you. I will gladly take you up on your offer to help and recommendations from you. I am new. I have had my telescope for a month now. Explore Scientific 152 millimeter achromat, 6.5 focal ratio, 988 millimeter focal length. Eyepieces, 2-inch Meade 100 degree, 21 millimeter, and Morpheus 6.5 millimeter. I was looking for a third eyepiece, but not sure if I should purchase a 3.5 or 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 millimeter. What do you recommend, please, for a third eyepiece? Your advice is greatly appreciated. So I own two 13 millimeter eyepieces. I own the 13 millimeter Nagler, which I typically use for my smaller telescopes. And then I have the 13 millimeter Ethos, and that's probably the one that I use the most. I use that on my 20-inch and on my 10-inch Dobsonian telescope. I love that eyepiece. Of course, it is a premium eyepiece. It's going to cost you quite a bit of money, but I use it a lot, and it is a fabulous eyepiece. So I personally would not recommend a 3.5 millimeter. I mean, that's a very high-powered eyepiece. You're probably going to use it very infrequently, if at all. For me personally, I own the 8-inch ethos eyepiece, and I almost never use it. Now, I have used it a little bit for planetary stuff like Uranus and Neptune on clear nights when the seeing conditions are good. But typically anything below 10 millimeter, I don't even use. I use 13 a lot. And of course, always recommend getting a good low power eyepiece. If I had to do it all over again, I would probably recommend something, you know, around the 31 millimeter range for your low power eyepiece. If you can afford it, a 31 millimeter Nagler is a fabulous eyepiece, but it's very expensive. And then my second eyepiece would probably be something either a 17 millimeter or a 13 millimeter. Again, I like the 13 millimeter. Ethos is very expensive. Those are premium. So are the Naglers. There's some other options out there that are more cost effective. And I know, Rick, you've got several as well. And so what are your thoughts on a third eyepiece or just eyepieces in general?
So I'm a huge Nagler fan, and their 85-degree apparent field of view. They, when I got started, and I've got a nice set of. I actually have a nice set of Teleview Plossels, and Plossels are fine, and everybody ought to have a set. If you know, good 1.25 inch set of Plossels is always handy. You'll use it with all kinds of telescopes. But you get into bigger telescopes and bigger eyepieces. Like I said, I'm a huge fan of the 82-degree apparent field of view Naglers. They got great eye relief. My eyesight's always been a challenge, and glasses have always been a challenge. You quit sharing your screen just in time for me to forget which ones he had. He has he's got a 6.5 Morpheus, right?
Let me get this back. Sorry about that.
Yes, 6.5 Morpheus.
There you go.
Just a quick. Go ahead.
Well, the Morpheus is that an 85 or a 100?
I think that's a 76.
76. Okay. 6.5 millimeter. You know, you're starting to get down to the usable magnification.
Yes,
6.5 millimeter.
The usable magnification is 260, and it's a 3.8 eyepiece for that scope.
Yeah.
So the 3.5 is definitely not in the list that he can have. I wouldn't
waste some money on it.
No, it's not worth it.
And the 21 made, you know, a 16 millimeter. 16 or a 13 would be good. I have a 35 millimeter Teleview Panoptic. Then I have a 16 millimeter Nagler, a 13 millimeter Nagler, a 9 millimeter Nagler, and a 4.5 millimeter Nagler. And the 4.5 was an adventure in just how far can I go with this, and the 4.5 was too far. I've almost never used that. It's the eye relief isn't that good, and the magnification's unusable. And that's in my 13-inch, and the 9 is a wonderful eyepiece. I love my 9 millimeter Nagler. And my second favorite's my 16. I could probably do without the 13 at all.
Yeah, if I had to do it over again, I wouldn't get the 8 millimeter Ethos. I would probably get the 10. That's as low as I would probably go. I do have a 5 millimeter. It's not an Ethos or a Nagler. I think it's a Meade. I almost never use it. If I have really good seeing conditions, I might use that for planetary. I have a 10 millimeter Meade that I use quite a bit for planetary stuff, and that's served me pretty well. The 9, yeah, I know, Rick, you love that 9 millimeter Nagler. You've let me borrow it a couple of times when I was actually getting started, and it's a great eyepiece. A general comment about eyepieces. I knew nothing when I was getting started, and somebody made this comment to me: you're going to delve slowly into the world of eyepieces. Obviously, you need one to get started. And a good low power eyepiece is that'll get you on the board. That'll get you started in observational astronomy. So my first eyepiece was a 20 millimeter Explore Scientific. I bought it brand new for about $300. I don't know what you could get it used for. There are other options out there that are much better, but 20 is still, even that is still not quite low power enough. I think 30, what was it? 25 to 30 millimeter would probably be a better choice for a low power eyepiece. And then, so that gets you started. And then, your second eyepiece would probably be either 16, like Rick talked about, or I like 13. And really, if you had just those two eyepieces, you can do a lot. You'll probably do 80% of your observing with those two eyepieces. And if you get a high power eyepiece, anything in the 5 or 6 range, you're going to use it pretty infrequently.
One thing, for those who have an 8-inch Smith Cassegrain, that telescope loved a 25 millimeter eyepiece.
That's why they almost always come with one, right?
Yes, those work very, very good. They are excellent for watching globular clusters. And I once saw Omega Centauri with my 8-inch from French Camp on a William Optics 25 millimeter eyepiece, and it was incredible.
Let me share this. See, this is my 13-inch Dob. I've had this for 20 years anyway. It was my second telescope.
Is that the old water heater you just took out?
Yeah. So if you'll notice, there is not a finder on that telescope. I have never had one on it. I've never used one. Especially on a Dob, I don't see the need in it. On an equatorial mounted telescope, when you can line up the crosshairs with the right ascension and declination axis, so that when you move, a star is going directly in parallel to those two axes, then you can use that for star hopping to find stuff. Other than that, I just don't find the need in it. But I ran across this eyepiece, and it was cheap. I think I paid $50 for it then. It's an Orion 32 millimeter Erfel. It's a horrible eyepiece. And with that said, I love it. It's huge. Look at that.
Looks like a photocopy lens.
It's like looking at a TV screen, and as you move the stars across, the spherical aberration is so bad. You got to be careful not to fall down, because the stars are wanting to go like they show you around a black hole or something. These moving curves. But it is a wonderful finder, right? It's a super wide field of view. It's bright. And I stick that in there, and I can, I get close with this. And then I start putting in the higher powered flat fields of view eyepieces. I love this thing. I've had it for forever. I have a 50 millimeter Celestron Plossl. And honestly, the apparent field of view is about the same as this 32 millimeter Erfel. So this thing is so big that it gets astigmatism. When it cools down, sometimes you can tell there's astigmatism in the lens.
All right. Anybody have any other questions? I'm just going to open it up here. And I got a couple more here that came in. Okay. All right. Here's another question. Happy New Year to you and the club. Hang on a sec. I've got to move. All right, here we go. Happy New Year to you and the club. I bought my first telescope last year and can tell you that is a learning process. I have viewed so many videos and read so many blogs. I will say that within a year, I've managed to use it quite well and even get some decent pictures of nebula. My goal was to do astrophotography and I'm pleased with my progress, but still have a lot to learn. For me, a couple things I struggled with the most was polar alignment and polar scope calibration. This might not be easy things to address at the meeting Friday night, but maybe one day when COVID is history, the club can do a hands-on session in the field. What are your thoughts? Yeah, absolutely. Obviously one of the disadvantages of doing this remotely is we don't get the one-on-one hands-on experience that we typically do for our January meetings. So we're definitely looking forward to the day when we can meet live and go through that. Now, the last time we did meet live, we actually did do a video demonstration, Keith did, of how to set up an 8-inch Schmidt-Cassegrain telescope on a German equatorial mount. That video is on our YouTube channel from, again, the last time we met live, which was March of last year. So, and he does cover polar alignment, his procedure for polar alignment in that video. So it might be worth checking out. Also, there's a difference between polar alignment when you're doing just basic observing. Like that's what I do. I'm not an astrophotographer. I'm a quick and dirty astronomer. Go ahead, Freddie.
No, you are not astrophotographer yet.
Not yet. I haven't caught the disease yet. Maybe someday.
Well, Jeremy, while he did say something, and I'll grab the screen away from you again when we stop sharing. If my videos pops up, because I'm going to, sorry, speaker view. Where's my video? All right. So he asked about the polar scope, right? Polar scope alignment. And that is a trick.
I need a lot of practice.
Yeah. So this telescope has what's called a polar scope. And personally, I hate it. That's why I spent the money on a polar alignment camera. Let me show you what that looks like. So there's actually a telescope back here that looks straight up through this mount. And in fact, it only looks through that mount when this is turned this way. And why that was, I never knew. But so this can actually look straight through the center line of this mountain. Well, that's a good idea in, sorry. This is a good idea in theory. You know, you got to align this axis with the North Star, put a scope in here and point it at the North Star, right? The problem is that most of the time these come not aligned with the rotational axis of the mount, and that's the trick. So the first thing you do when you get one of these mounts is you have to find the settings, the adjustment screws on it. They're right back here, and you have to lay the mount down to where you can point it at something, again, far away, like one of those insulators on top of a power pole or something, and get it so that as you rotate the mount, that object stays in the center of that field of view and these crosshairs in this telescope. And until it does, this telescope is not aligned with the rotational axis. And that is difficult. There are 3 little bitty Allen head set screws in here to do that with. It took me hours to get it the first time. It took a minute to understand that the image of the Little Dipper that they show you in there has got nothing to do with any of that, right? That's a whole nother thing, because then once you get this where it's lined up and doesn't move as this rotates, then where that image of the Little Dipper is can rotate around that axis, and that gets down to knowing what time it is and what orientation the Dipper is supposed to be in, at that time. And that tells you, the truth is you don't line up on the North Star. You line up off of the North Star. The North Star is not exactly in the center of the axis of the rotation of Earth. So, and as time passes, it's going to be less and less so, right? Because in 20,000 years, the North Star will be Vega, right? So you have to get that offset. When you start to do astrophotography, especially at high magnifications, this is where that kind of precision gets to be required. I struggled with that. I'm not a big astrophotographer. In fact, all of this stuff, I'm not into astrophotography. I'm not into post-processing. I'm into real-time imaging. My intention with all this stuff is to be able to put it up on a big screen or a projector so that I can show people live what this telescope is looking at. But I have invested in a polar alignment scope and the software. And actually, the truth of the matter is this thing will do it quite well. I just haven't got everything set up right yet to do that. My guide scope isn't properly focused yet. I've got to get some time to get out and get that done. But this actually mounts right here. And then the software to use this there's no focusing here. This thing sees everything it needs to see in light polluted skies. I was amazed how well it did. The software is simple to use. It tells you exactly how to adjust the physical adjustments of the mount to get it right where it needs to be with the proper offset for the North Star. And inside of 10 minutes, I am as polar aligned as I have ever been with all the telescopes I've had. And tracking has just been dead on every time. And I'm seriously impressed with this. But these work, but they're a hassle. So
you have to practice and practice, and then if you stay 3 or 2 months out of practice, then you are rusty and it takes longer.
Got to remember how to do it again. Yeah.
And the polar scope is fragile. So if you bump the telescope where you are disassemble it, or the Orion is okay because it has that cover, but the mid and Celestron mounts were very fragile. So if you bump the telescope, you probably will disalign the polar scope and you have to start back from scratch aligning the polar scope.
I thought about taking mine out and running the cables up through there. But
you hate that polar scope, right?
I never use it again. I'll be fine.
All I can say is, wouldn't it be cool to go into cryogenic freeze and then to have somebody wake you up and you walk outside and you see the night sky and you expect to see Polaris and instead you see Vega as the North Star?
Yeah,
Oh, well,
that'd be something.
It's so cool.
Of course, in 20,000 years, you probably won't be able to see the night sky the way light pollution's going.
Yeah.
It'll never be night.
And Vega will not be in the same way it was before. The constellation will not be the same.
Yeah, that's true too.
Yeah. All right. Let's see here. I got a couple more. Jeremy, as a fellow astronomer, I feel compelled to tell you that I have witnessed small orbs the size of a small melon. Put it this way, as you may know how to calculate, the orbs I saw were not more than 3 to 5 miles up, probably less than that, using a 988 millimeter focal length refractor with a 21 millimeter eyepiece, 100 degrees. The orbs almost filled the eyepiece. I also say 3 cigar-shaped vertical structures hanging in midair, but also I saw with a 760 millimeter refractor with a 12 millimeter eyepiece. Lastly, this Sunday, when President Trump signed the new stimulus package, it also started the 180-day countdown for the department responsible for UFOs info to get their files ready for complete disclosure to the world. Clear skies and thanks again.
Was there a
Yeah,
question in there?
maybe 2021 will be the year that we get the mystery solved. Not the election, but the 73-year conspiracy or controversy. So, and incidentally, this is one of the dangers of a clunky transition of power when you have both sides that need to communicate. Things can get lost, things can slip through the cracks, and things can leak. So it's
Well,
very important.
maybe you will meet the Vulcans this year.
Maybe. Oh, that's 2063, I believe, was the official date. But interesting. Is anybody else see these orbs in the sky? By the way, we've had cloudy weather here the last several weeks. We haven't had many clear skies, many clear nights.
Not since college.
Not since college.
Then I saw a lot of stuff when I was in college that I've never seen again since.
Saw a lot of stuff in college too. Some of it was real.
That's what I'm getting at.
All right.
I have another quick thing to share. A lot of astronomy software is, you start using it to find where stuff's at. You go out in the night sky right now. In the city, if you can see, if you get in the darkest places of the city, you can start to see the constellations. Right now, all you can see are the brightest stars and maybe make out some of the brightest constellations. If you go out where it's really, really dark and you can't find the constellations anymore because there's too many stars. And that's kind of what I was showing here. Come on. All right. So this is why it's good to know where you're at. So the first thing you want to do is get your orientation. There's the ground. So if I swing around here to the north, I kind of get a feel for things, and I look up straight north. Well, that's not it. Wait a minute. There you go. There's a good bright star in the north, and sure enough, that's Polaris, right? And if I'm starting to swing around here, but I'm just looking up in the sky, what I want to see is, what does my tail red, those little red rings on my tail red, how do they relate here? So let me...
Rick, can you tell us what software you're using?
I am using Starry Night. This is
okay.
the PC version of Sky Safari, same company. And in fact, all this stuff syncs up with my iOS and iPad versions. So all these entries I will actually see on my iPad. This is, let me turn on my tail rad field of view. All right, so that's what the tail rad's looking at, right? And I'm running around here and looking for things I recognize, and that whole thing right there kind of looks familiar. 3 bright stars in a row. That's a pretty good hint that this is the belt of Orion. And this is the sword, and that middle thing in the sword turns out not to be a star, but you're going to want to center the telescope on that. We're going to zoom in to look at M42. And so we start to zoom in, you start to see some nebulosity. Now, what I'm going to do now is show you what that 35 millimeter panoptic would see in the way of a field of view, right? So there it is. I'm going to turn off the tail rad. And there's, now this is in my f4.5 13-inch Coulter Dobsonian. So that's the focal ratio is f4.5. I forget what the actual focal length is. the focal length times the focal length of the eyepiece will tell you your magnification. So you are divided by the focal length. Oh, is it? I forget which way it is. Anyway, that's my 35 millimeter Panoptic. My second favorite eyepiece is my 16 millimeter Nagler, and I'll dive in to look at that field of view. And then I always top off everything with my 9 millimeter Nagler, and that is here. And you know, and by now I'm looking at the trapezium and trying to see if I can see the fifth star in the trapezium, and this picture is ugly, so can't really tell. This is what it does look like on a bad seeing night, right? And that's another thing that we really haven't talked about, but you know, one of the things that'll kick in with your first telescope is aperture fever. I don't care what size telescope you got, you're gonna want a bigger one at some time. And what you need to know about bigger telescopes is they have their own set of issues. When you consider the diameter of the telescope, no matter whether it's a lens or a mirror, that's the amplifier, right? And so when you're amplifying light, you're also amplifying the noise. So when you got a noisy signal, you're going to have more noise. Bad seeing night is going to show up a whole lot worse in a big telescope than it does in a small one. Contrast goes away in a big telescope due to light pollution and light scatter. Light pollution I'm talking about is that glow in the sky of light being reflected back at Earth from the atmosphere. Light scatter is if you're observing in your own neighborhood, your backyard, house lights, street lights that are actually can be seen from the side of the telescope. That light will scatter into the input of the telescope and bounce around inside it and cause issues. Almost all big telescopes are reflectors, right? So they got big mirrors in them. Big mirrors change shape as they change temperature. So there's that. They need to cool down. They need to become ambient air temperature. The other thing that happens in that process is, and for a long time, people thought it was air currents inside the tube. It turns out that that's probably less the impact as what's called boundary layer currents, right? So in that area just above the surface of the mirror, if the mirror is warmer or colder than the outside air, that air, as it's transferring that energy away from the mirror or into the mirror, that air is turbulent and it just sits there and boils right on top of the mirror. If your telescope suffers from that sort of thing, this is where fans come in. This is why a lot of the bigger Dobbs and what have you have got fans to pull air across the top of that mirror. They'll typically be mounted in the side of the telescope, not back behind the mirror. You're not just trying to evacuate air out of the tube. You're trying to get a laminar airflow across the mirror so that you don't have that boiling boundary layer. So those are the things, those are some of the things that can impact your views. We have on our website, we have this clear sky clock. Now with the accuracy of the weather predictions here are, I don't know. This is a guy in Canada does this. He's built this in modeling of Canadian Weather Service data. He's a mathematician that models all this. So he's predicting the future, which of course in the weather business is always wrong.
Risky.
What was it? Supposedly Einstein once said, as there's a lot of stuff attributed to Einstein. Who knows whether he really said it or not? But how does it go? All models are wrong. Some are useful. The cloud cover, most of the time, they're pretty close. Not cloud cover is a tough one to judge. Transparency is got a lot to do with how much stuff's in the air. A lot of times that amounts to water. But seeing is the one here that most people ignore. And if you got a bigger telescope, it's probably your bigger enemy. We don't get great seeing around Memphis very often. So if you find a night, find a weekend, or find an evening where we've got clear skies, decent transparency, but above and beyond all, dark colors of blue here, good seeing, that's when you take your scope out and prepare to be amazed, because we can get some good views here from time to time. So I wanted to share this clear sky clock, and it's on our webpage, access to it. This is actually set up just for Memphis, for the Memphis Astronomical Society. Let's see, what else seemed like it was another thing I wanted to share, but I can't remember what it was.
Yeah, speaking of seeing, Freddie, you probably remember this. We had a night at Burton's a couple of years ago, and we just had exceptional seeing, a very rare night where it wasn't only clear, but we also had very good seeing conditions. Saturn was out. I've never seen Saturn quite like that before. I mean, you could clearly see the Cassini division in the rings. You could see the banding structure on the face of the planet.
It was great.
Very rare to get a night like that. You probably remember that night.
Yes, I do.
I've actually had caught a night where seeing was good enough that I got color in my 13-inch telescope on Jupiter.
Wow.
And it was just amazing. I'm not a huge fan of Barlow's. We didn't talk any about that. A lot of people will try to pick up Barlow's. In my opinion, that's just adding more surfaces of glass, right? No piece of glass is 100% transmissive light. You lose light at every interface. Going into the glass, coming out of the glass, you lose a little bit of light. You add up those, now coatings can make that better, but at some point you get into the quantum effects of light going through glass, and it's simply impossible to get all the light through the glass. So I just try to reduce the number of pieces of glass in the light path. So
you mentioned the Nagler line. Is there another line that you would recommend that maybe has fewer elements in the path where you are not filtering light through as many layers of glass?
You know, I haven't given that a lot of study. My issue when I got started in astronomy, my glasses were 4 times that thickness. In fact, my eyes got to the point where they couldn't make glasses for me anymore. I had to have eye surgery. I had to have the lenses replaced in my eyes for them to be able to make glasses for me. Now, my eyes were also so bad that they could not completely correct my vision. I still have astigmatism. I'm still farsighted. But it was so bad they couldn't make glasses that would correct my vision. So for me, my early adventures into astronomy was eye relief. You know, the distance you could be from the eyepiece and still get a good view. You know, as we get older, this idea of exit pupil, you know, how big is that column of light coming out of the eyepiece. You know, I'm old enough now that I can't take advantage of all of it. My iris doesn't open up wide enough to take advantage in all that light. So I don't know. I got to be a fan of the Naglers. I love the 82-degree apparent field of view. When I started with Naglers, they didn't have 100-degree apparent field of view eyepieces. It was as good as they got. So
Yeah.
I've just been a fan.
I'm kind of an eyepiece snob. I do like the 100-degree field of view. I've got a couple of the Ethos lines. I've got, well, of course, the Explore Scientific is a good counterpart if you don't want to spend the money for either the Naglers or the Ethos. And the 100-degree field of view Meade, again, I've got the 10-inch eyepiece. Sky and Telescope did a write-up on that a couple of years ago, so I picked that eyepiece up. That's actually been a pretty good planetary eyepiece for me as well. And we do cover alternative eyepiece types in one of our telescope tips episodes, episode 21, I think it is. Brian Hancock has got some excellent recommendations. So it's just different strokes for different folks.
As is most of this hobby.
Yeah. So does anybody else online have any other questions? We're about wrapping up here. We're getting close to the end. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen one more time. You have anything else to add, Rick?
Oh, you know, you reminded me of something. So let me share this real quick, because in case somebody wants some of the math and some of the other stuff that we did not go over tonight that we normally do in the past, I wanted to show you where a quick, we have these documents here written by Bill Bustler, and he's got a lot of good information here. This is handy reference information. We recommend printing off a copy of this and keeping it in your telescope case. You want to know what your magnification is? It's the focal length of the telescope itself divided by the focal length of the eyepiece. Limiting magnitude. You want to see how dim of an object you can expect to be able to see in a with a given telescope and the diameter of it. Let's see. There's some good tips here on using sky charts. Finding the sun. You know, you don't think about that. You know, of course, you don't want to do that until you've got a solar filter or you've got a projection, the ability to project the image of the sun onto a piece of paper or something. But the handiest trick for finding the sun is using the sun's shadow, using the shadow of the telescope, and minimizing the size of the shadow of the telescope will just about always put it in the telescope. And we have, if you've got a Newtonian and you think you're out of collimation, we have two different well-written approaches to collimating a telescope here on our website. I'm a laser guy, so I use lasers to do mine. That's not here, but I probably ought to write one of those up. If you want to do collimation with lasers, I can help you with that. So that's really all I've got.
We should really do a presentation sometime exclusively on collimation, something I need a lot of practice with too. Full disclosure, a lot of times when I get out with my Dobsonians, I don't even do collimation. I mean, good is good enough. And I'm sure the images are not as crisp as they would be if it was fully collimated, but it's something I personally need more practice on. And if you're a Dobsonian telescope owner / operator, yeah, collimation is an essential an essential practice, if you will. So yeah, we definitely need to address that. But it's an excellent document that's on our website also.
I think that due to the changes in life, we cannot observe from our homes, so you cannot take out the scope every night. If you were to take the scope every night, I bet you that you will be an expert in collimation.
Yeah.
But we go once a month in the best case.
Yeah,
So
sometimes 9 months without being able to take.
without looking at
dark
anything,
skies.
there is no way you can master any procedure like collimation without observing.
Yeah. I'll just remember being at the Okie-Tex Star Party a couple of years ago. I had my 20-inch set up. The skies were magnificent. I was ready to go. And I looked through the eyepiece and I saw comets, and my heart just sank. So I worked on it. And Bill, guy I never met before, he was right across the way and don't even know where he was from. He came over and he was just the nicest guy. And he helped me. He had the laser, plugged it in there, and he held a book over the tube of my telescope. And I mean, the laser was so far off that you could literally hold the book above the tube of the telescope and it was shining on there. So I got behind there and I tweaked the primary mirror until we got the laser in place. And then he basically walked me through it. And he basically saved the night for me. I mean, it was smooth sailing from that point on. But, if I didn't have him, I would have been sunk that night. And what a disaster to drive 2 hours to a star party and then not have your telescope fully collimated. So thank you, Bill. I never met you before. Hopefully I'll see you again. But that's one of the cool things about going to a remote star party is you meet some really friendly and cool people who are willing to help you out. So once this COVID mess is over, if you have an opportunity to get to a dark sky, one of the star parties remotely, there are several of them throughout the country. I would recommend taking an opportunity to do that. It definitely is a commitment to get out there, but once you're there, the people you meet, the telescopes, you get a chance to look through, there's presentations, and of course the skies are just magnificent. So
We have one
hopefully we get back
happens
to it.
every year in spring, 3.5 hours south of here at French Camp, Mississippi. It's on the Natchez Trace Parkway. And they have got some wonderful telescopes there at that facility. They've got an observatory. And it's always been a good star party. Mid-South Star Party.
Stargaze.
What's it called?
Mid-South Stargaze.
Mid-South
Yes.
Stargaze. Yeah, that's it.
So
There is a
we do have
question
yeah.
in the chat.
Are there any dark sky sites near Memphis accessible to us? Probably French Camp is the closest one of. I mean, in Arkansas, there are a few also, if you're willing to drive to the Ozarks. The Wilderness Rider Ranch and Park, it's a long name. Brian and Keith went there back in the summer to view Comet Neowise. And it's a little bit more of a commitment to get there, but I guess there's some spectacular skies there also. I don't know what Bortle class it is. Bortle 2, maybe. I think it's a man.
Our site where we normally go is Bortle 4, I think.
That's Burton Sugar Farm.
Burton Sugar Farm.
Of course.
Village Creek State Park, about 45 minutes to an hour west of here in Arkansas, is on Crawley's Ridge and is not bad. A little darker than our dark sky site. Back up toward Nashville, exit 22, I think it was. Or was it 30? Anyway, Ben Hudgens and Ben knew a guy had a farm up there, and we'd go drive up I-40 to one of the exits and get off and drive out in the middle of one of those bean fields and set up telescopes. It wasn't bad, but you need permission to do that. And I don't think that guy's there anymore. But our parks, Shelby Forest is It's certainly better than Shelby Farms, but you're still not out from under the light dome of Memphis. You're gonna have to get further away than that.
It's getting harder for us to find truly dark skies. 2 words, go west. The further west you go, the better your chances probably are, depending on how far west you want to go. Okay. Let me share my screen here a minute. So we've pretty much answered this question with regard to eyepieces. I'll just go ahead and summarize here. The last paragraph, my understanding is to get planetary clarity, I need to fall above 200 magnification. If an eyepiece that was close to 7.5 millimeters divided by my focal length of 805 would give me 107, then multiplying that with a 2x Barlow would give me 214 for planetary viewing. Does that make sense? Well, we talked about Barlows. I do tend to concur with Rick, not a big fan of Barlows, but keep in mind with higher magnification comes, first of all, less light. You're typically getting you're getting less light with higher magnification because of exipupil. And then also if the seeing conditions are not good, you're not only magnifying the object, but you're also magnifying the distortion. So there's a lot of factors that come into play when it comes to trying to zero in on a planet and magnify it and actually see features. It's been a frustrating journey, quite frankly, for me, because I want to see the great red spot on Jupiter as well as the bands, and then also the banding on Saturn. But oftentimes we get a lot of mush here because the seeing conditions are not the best. So yeah, we kind of covered that. But Rick, you have anything else you want to add?
Well, in this case, that might not be the worst thing. At 7.5 millimeter eyepiece is getting to be pretty short focal length for an eyepiece. I have never seen a 3 or 4 millimeter eyepiece that I actually considered usable. So in this case, a 2x Barlow might be the best way to get up to that 200x limit. However, what he doesn't mention, maybe he does, 115 millimeter refractor, right? So
Yeah.
what you're going to run out of with that is resolution. So I'm not sure that you can really use 200 power with 115 millimeter diameter. You're just not going to have the resolution.
Well, my first thought on his basic premise was that to get planetary clarity, the word clarity, you have to go to 200 power. That's not right. One way to think about excess magnification or empty magnification is zooming in on a digital image. Okay, if you zoom in far enough, you're going to get square pixels because they're in an eyepiece. With light, there are only so many photons, and the more magnification you use, the more you spread them out, and eventually, the less clarity you get because you spread them out to where it's just fuzzy. So, what he's proposing is to essentially turn a 7.5 millimeter eyepiece into a 3.8 millimeter eyepiece with a 2-power Barlow. And you can almost never get any useful viewing with something of that focal length.
Yeah. The lowest I like to go is 10 millimeters, maybe 8. And I can still see the resolution is still good enough where I can see detail and the image is magnified enough where I can zoom in. Below that, for me personally, I haven't had very good results, even at 8. It hasn't.
I have an 8mm eyepiece, and I very rarely use it.
Yeah.
The seeing has to be, the seeing and the steadiness and the transparency have to be exceptional to really use that. Mostly I use a 16mm eyepiece. 24, 16 are the ones that I would use them. I have a 32, 24, 16, and 8. And the one I use the most is 16.
Yeah, I use a 20, a 13. I got a 24 now, and I again, the 31mm Nagler, not very budget friendly, but that's probably the next indiscretionary expense that I will incur when time permits, because I love that eyepiece. Okay. That's all I've got. Does anybody else have any other questions or comments as we wrap up here?
I got one thing.
Yes.
I'd like to thank you for the help I got. This was an awesome meeting. I learned so much. I'm going to have to lay down now and just let it sink in. But thank you. You do a great meeting, and I appreciate you. Y'all have a happy new year, and maybe next week, Friday, Saturday, I can come in for the star party. I enjoy those as well. Y'all do a good job there. So take care and have a good one.
Thanks a lot, Mike.
Thank you.
Appreciate you taking the time to log in. Happy New Year to you too.
All right. Thanks a lot.
All right.
All right.
Kind of wrapping up here. Again, find us on social media. We're on Facebook. We've got a group. Take a minute to subscribe to this YouTube channel. Again, want to thank all of the subscribers. Thank everyone who logged on tonight for being a part of the community and for continuing to add value and really participate as we ride this out. These are critical times. Each month that we get together and meet and gather as a community, we're being a part of the solution, not a part of the problem. These times will end. We're going to get past this. Better times are coming. We're going to get back to some semblance of normal again soon. It's going to happen this year. So I want to thank everyone for your support and participation over the past 9 to 12 months. And again, going to joinmes.com if you're not already on our email list. And I got to update this slide. This is actually the January sky chart that I'm going to have, as well as the membership application. There are links to both of these in the description below this video. Again, if you want to become a member, download the membership application, fill it out, and email it back to us. And that's it. So anybody got anything else they want to add?
Happy New Year, everyone.
Yes, same.
Happy New Year.
All right. Happy New Year, everybody. Thanks for participating, and we'll see you. Well, I'll send out a notice regarding next week's virtual star party. Keep an eye on your email, and we'll see you next month. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.